November 1859, Richmond, Virginia. The dawn air in Richmond carried the familiar, pungent aroma of cured tobacco from the warehouses lining the James River, yet beneath it lingered a far more acrid scent, the palpable odor of human fear. On the steps of Lumpkins Jail, that notorious slave-trading depot known locally as the Devil's Half-Acre, two small figures stood hand in hand. They were 7 years old, identical twins named Samuel and Joseph. In less than an hour, the institution that had already stolen their mother, their father, and every vestige of a secure childhood would perform its final, calculated cruelty. It would tear them from each other forever. Or so it believed. The auctioneer's voice sliced through the murmuring crowd, a sound as sharp and dismissive as a whip crack. Potential buyers moved with a clinical detachment, examining musculature, dental health, the unblemished skin of backs. The boys' grip on each other's fingers tightened into a silent pact. They could not comprehend the specific numbers and terms shouted around them, but they understood perfectly the language of terror reflected in each other's wide eyes. What they could not possibly know, what no soul in that cold Virginia courtyard could have fathomed, was that 37 years later, against every conceivable odds, these two brothers would find one another again. One would be a freedman laboring on the bustling docks of Baltimore, the other, a preacher tending a small congregation outside Atlanta, and when they finally stood face to face in 1896, the tale of their survival, their unwavering memory, and their dogged, lifelong search would become a profound testament to the one thing the slave system tried, and ultimately failed to destroy: the unbreakable, spiritual bond of blood and shared origin. To ensure stories of this magnitude are never forgotten, consider subscribing to Tales of Slavery. Your support helps preserve these vital chapters of human endurance. Now let us continue. The late 1850s represented the deepest nadir of American slavery. By 1859, nearly 4 million black men, women, and children were held in bondage across the South. Virginia stood as the largest exporter of enslaved people in the nation, with Richmond serving as the grim capital of this commodified human trade. Auctions were weekly, sometimes daily affairs. Families were disassembled with a casual brutality reserved for livestock. Children were assessed as property, their future labor potential quantified, their inherent humanity negated by law and custom. Samuel and Joseph entered this world in the spring of 1852 on a tobacco plantation in Henrico County just beyond Richmond. Their mother, Esther, labored in the fields from first light to last. Their father, Thomas, was owned by a different master 10 miles distant, a man the boys would never know. In the perverse logic of slavery, familial love was an unaffordable luxury and kinship a systemic risk. When the twins were 5, Esther was sold to a planter in South Carolina. They never saw her again. For 2 more years, the brothers remained on the plantation, tasked with childish chores, carrying water, picking worms from tobacco leaves, running errands. But in the autumn of 1859, the plantation owner died, his debts outweighing his estate. Everything, including Samuel and Joseph, was to be liquidated. The night before the auction, the boys slept side by side in the quarters, their small forms curled together for warmth and comfort. They possessed no framework for the impending calamity, sensing only that the adults around them prayed with a more desperate fervor, and that the women wept without sound. November 14, 1859. Began in darkness. They were roused before sunrise, scrubbed with cold water, and dressed in coarse but clean shirts, a cruel performance of presentability for the buyers. A stranger tied a rope loosely around their thin wrists, linking them together, and led them on foot through the waking streets of Richmond. Men in fine coats passed without a glance. Joseph began to cry. Samuel, echoing the low, steady tone of their lost mother, whispered a mantra into the chill air. "We stay together, we stay together." He repeated it like a prayer against the coming storm. Lumpkins Jail at the corner of Broad and 15th Street was a 3-story brick monstrosity with barred windows. It was one of the most infamous slave pens in the South, a processing center for thousands destined for disintegration. The boys were ushered into a holding room where 30 others sat in a silence thicker than any noise. The air was stale with sweat, dust, and a collective, choking desperation. Samuel and Joseph pressed their shoulders together against a wall, bearing a weight of dread they had no words for, a burden heavy as iron. At 10 o'clock, the ritual commenced. The buyers assembled in the courtyard: planters, speculators, traders seeking inventory for resale. The auctioneer, a man named Pulliam, took his place on the wooden block. He was known for his efficiency and his ice-cold demeanor. One by one, human beings were paraded before him. Ages, skills, and physical attributes were called out, bids were barked, lives were transferred in minutes. A woman was sold to Georgia, a teenage boy to Alabama. A nursing mother pleaded not to be parted from her infant. She was sold to one man, her baby to another. When Samuel and Joseph were led out, still clinging to one another, a faint ripple of interest passed through the crowd. Identical twins were a rarity. Pulliam saw an opportunity.
"Two strong boys," he announced. "Healthy 7 years, a matched pair, good for house or field."
Sold together or separate, your choice. Bidding opened. A tobacco farmer offered $300 for the pair. A man in a gray coat raised it. Then a trader from New Orleans, a Mr. Calloway, stepped forward. His eyes were flinty, his reputation, that of a bulk purchaser of children for the Deep South market. He did not want both. He pointed at Joseph. "I'll take the one on the left. $400. Pulliam paused. It was more than he'd get for the pair. The farmer withdrew. The gavel fell. Joseph was sold. Samuel was not. The catastrophe unfolded before the boys could comprehend it. A hand seized Joseph's arm, pulling him toward the gate. Then Samuel screamed. He lunged, wrapping his entire body around his brother's waist in a final, fierce amalgamation. Joseph sobbed, crying his brother's name. It took 2 men to pry them apart. Samuel fought with a feral intensity, kicking, biting, clawing. They pinned him down. Joseph was dragged through the gate and thrown into the back of a waiting wagon. Samuel's last sight was his twin's face, pressed against the wooden slats, tears carving paths through the dust, mouth agape in a silent, eternal scream. Samuel was sold 20 minutes later to a farmer named Whitfield near Fredericksburg. For 3 days the boy was catatonic. He refused food, sitting in a corner of the barn, staring into the void. Whitfield's wife, a woman of severe disposition, slapped him and called him foolish. But Samuel was not being foolish. A fundamental trust in the order of the world had been shattered within him. He now understood with a clarity no child should possess, that nothing was permanent, everything could be stolen, and love offered no protection. Joseph, meanwhile, was aboard a steamboat churning down the Mississippi. Calloway had purchased 11 other children in Richmond for resale in New Orleans. The journey lasted 2 weeks, the children confined below deck, shackled at night. Joseph scarcely ate. In the darkness, he whispered his brother's name, a talisman against oblivion. An older boy advised him to forget, insisting it made survival easier. Joseph shook his head. To forget was the ultimate betrayal. In New Orleans, Joseph was sold again, this time to a sugar plantation owner named Dufresne in St. James Parish. The work was a special kind of hell. Sugarcane demanded back-breaking labor under a crushing sun. By 10, Joseph was in the fields, his hands bleeding, his back a constant ache. He survived by nurturing a single, stubborn ember within a promise that he would find Samuel again. Samuel's life in Virginia was different in texture but no less arduous. Whitfield's farm was smaller, its rhythms dictated by wheat and corn. There were 6 other enslaved people there. Whitfield was not gratuitously cruel, but he was a strict disciplinarian who believed in extracting full value from his property. Samuel learned obedience, silence, and diligence. But internally he became a vigilant archivist. He listened, memorized names of towns and traders, cataloged directions. He clung to the hope that knowledge might one day become a map leading back to his brother. The Civil War arrived in 1861. To 9-year-old Samuel, it was a distant rumble that made supplies scarce and whispers of freedom loud. By 1865, the war ended. Whitfield assembled everyone and, with resentful flatness, informed them they were free and could stay for wages. Some did. Samuel, now 13, did not. He walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination that had crystallized into purpose. He went first to Richmond, a city scarred by war and teeming with freed people searching for lost kin. He haunted churches, missionary aid stations, and bureaus, scarring any fragmentary record that might exist. No one knew Joseph. For 2 years he traveled Petersburg, Norfolk, asking his question into a void of unimaginable scale. 4 million souls had been scattered. Finding one was cosmic needle threading. He took odd jobs, slept in alleys, and never ceased his inquiry. In 1867, he reached Baltimore, a magnet for black migration. He found work on the docks, a grueling but steady occupation. He rented a room, learned to read, built a life. He married a woman named Ruth, and they had 3 children. Yet every ship from the south, every new face, prompted the same quiet question. Years folded into decades. Samuel turned 20, then 30. The vibrant hope of a boy began to feel like the quiet, persistent scar of a man. Well-meaning people advised him to move on. He could not. The image of Joseph's face against the wagon wood was seared into his consciousness, a promise made in a moment of severance that he was bound to keep. Joseph's path through freedom was steeper. When the war ended, Dufresne delayed the news. Joseph learned of his liberty through the grapevine and simply walked away from the plantation at 13, shoeless and penniless. He moved north, following the river, a solitary figure in a landscape of peril. Freedmen's Bureau camps offered temporary succor. In Baton Rouge, he worked on the docks, saved his pennies, and asked his own futile questions about a brother named Samuel. In 1867, a rumor led him to a church in Atlanta, Bethlehem African Methodist Episcopal, where a Reverend Lucas maintained lists of people searching for family. Joseph waited for hours to tell his story. The Reverend recorded it with a sad empathy. He had heard too many such stories with no resolution. Joseph stayed in Atlanta. He learned carpentry, his hands crafting beauty from ruin in a city rebuilding from ashes. He bought land, built a small cabin, his first owned thing, and felt its emptiness acutely. He met and married Clara, a seamstress of profound understanding. She did not ask him to abandon his search, she joined it. They wrote letters, placed advertisements in black-owned newspapers. They received echoes, but never the right voice. Joseph, respected for his steady character and quiet faith, was eventually asked to lead the congregation after Reverend Lucas's passing. He became Reverend Joseph, a witness who preached resilience from a pulpit of lived experience. In Baltimore, Samuel's eldest son, Thomas, now 16, noticed his father's perennial quiet sorrow. One evening he asked for its source. Samuel, after a lifetime of silence, told him about Joseph. We should keep looking. Inspired by his son's faith, Samuel placed one more advertisement in 1896, this time with exhaustive detail, names, dates, locations. It cost a month's wages. Ruth supported it without question. The notice ran in the Atlanta Constitution. Clara saw it first. She handed the paper to Joseph, her finger trembling on the small print. Joseph read it. Then he read it again. The world narrowed to those few lines. After 37 years, a thread had finally surfaced from the abyss. He wrote a letter that same day, his script shaky with a storm of emotion. 2 weeks later, Samuel returned from the docks to find Ruth in their doorway, an envelope in her hand. He sat on the front step, opened it, and wept into his hands. I found him. He managed to whisper to his gathered family. I found my brother. 3 weeks later, Samuel and his son Thomas boarded a southbound train. Joseph and Clara waited on the Atlanta platform. When Samuel descended, the two men saw each other across the crowd. Time compressed and then vanished. They were 44, they had been 7. In that suspended moment, recognition was instantaneous and absolute, a mirroring of soul as much as feature. They moved toward each other, the station crowd parting, sensing a sacred event. They stopped a few feet apart. Joseph, Samuel breathed. Samuel, Joseph echoed, and then they were embracing, clutching one another as if to fuse the decades of separation, weeping tears that held a lifetime of searching, longing, and unwavering fidelity. They held on for a long, long time, a living monument to a bond that no power on earth could permanently sunder. Samuel stayed for 2 weeks. They talked, they wept, they laughed. They sat in restorative silence. They discovered parallel lives of struggle, resilience, and enduring hope. They pledged annual visits and constant correspondence, a promise they kept faithfully until Samuel's death in 1908. Joseph lived until 1921, their story becoming his most powerful sermon, not one of tragedy alone, but of indomitable love that outlasted the auction block. In a cemetery outside Atlanta, a single headstone bears 2 names side by side, Samuel and Joseph, brothers, reunited. It was placed by their children whose lives remained intertwined. Every spring, fresh flowers appear there, a quiet, perennial testament to the truth that some promises are kept, even when the keeping requires a lifetime. If this story of unyielding hope and familial fidelity resonated with you, please share it so others may witness this testament to the human spirit. To ensure you never miss such profound narratives, subscribe Tales of Slavery. Together, we keep memory alive and honor the journeys of those who came before us.